So I think because they've pushed it so far, it turns level-headed people against the whole agenda because it's going way too far. Whereas in the '60s, it was just made sense. It was common sense. Whereas now, like it's gone. It's just gone too far. Like nonsensical.
Well, they use drugs in the 60s to take it too far, and you see where that's led us, right? So the hippies were like, "No, man, we're not going to play by society's rules. We're going to start our own communities. We're going to start our own governments in our own areas." And then the federal groups like the CIA infiltrated that with drugs, and then it became, we're going to do whatever drugs we want whenever we want, man, and fuck you if you try to stop us. And then what happened? Now we live in a society full of drug addicts, right? I mean, street drugs are killing people. They're not like they were in the 60s where people could get some pot and maybe some acid on the street and have a great day. No, now it's like, hey, you want a new like way to ruin your life and basically spend all your money on something that's self-destructive. Like that's what drugs became. And then on the legal side, it's the same thing. It's dependency and self-destruction, just in a slower form. It takes longer. But by the time you're in your 70s or 80s and you have dementia, you wonder why. Well, maybe you shouldn't have listened to your doctor who gave you all these fucking foreign weird chemicals. I mean, all the weird things that were in food back then too, like in the cans and the Monsanto and the DEET that was being sprayed on all the crops. So tons of things that made people sick and whatnot. But
There's still so many ingredients in America that are legal, but illegal over here.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's one of the great like I think illuminators for when I was younger and I was trying to figure out this health stuff. I was like, whoa, in Europe they don't do fluoride in the water. Why are we doing that here? Oh, they say, oh, it's for your teeth. You're gonna have terrible teeth if you don't use fluoride. It doesn't seem to be bothering anybody else in the world. That's what one of the benefits of the information age is now they can't keep that kind of stuff away from us. In the 60s and 70s, I mean, who the fuck knew what other countries were doing unless you went there and found out? Right now I can look it up and see, oh yeah, MSG is banned in this country. Why? Well, because it's probably bad for you, but it's not banned in all these other countries. Maybe it's actually good for me, right? I think this is the kind of thing that people need to start to wrap their head around. And I don't know how much things have changed since the EU got involved with Europe, but I'm pretty sure Europe is pretty forward when it comes to like organic foods and not using genetically modified ingredients. And you guys are oodles ahead of us in education, and the countries that do kind of follow that lead are again ahead in education. Meanwhile, America is experimenting all these crazy genetic modified foods and all these crazy ingredients, and look at where the average person's intelligence is going. It's going down the drain. So I don't think there's a coincidence there. I think it's all connected for sure. And like we were saying with the hippies and the drugs, that was a step too far for the hippies, and it threw that off and made people kind of question that whole thing. Same thing's happening, to your point, Aaron, with this social justice warrior woke movement, where they're going 20 steps too far. And I think the reaction from the average person, unfortunately, is going to be maybe 2 steps backward. And that's exactly the opposite of what these progressives want, but it's what they're going to get, because they're not really being they're not being authentic. They're just being kind of manipulated by these people who are aware of the fourth turning, aware of the generational differences, aware of the yuga cycle, and trying to be ahead of that. These puppeteers, these monarchs who have shifted to become plutocrats and then shifted to become like these shadowy, capitalists behind these big, huge groups, Bilderbergs, WEF, and all that. They see 20 steps ahead and want us to be thinking 20 days ahead. They only want us thinking 20 days ahead, while they're thinking 20 years ahead, 20 decades ahead, right? So that's what we're up against. And, I think the faster we can point out how they've done this and how they've gotten to this point, the quicker it'll all come crashing down. And so to anyone listening, I say look in your own backyard, because it's a lot more effective and efficient to do it that way, to start with what's closest to you and to start with what you know. And I think that the sooner people start to look around their own city or their own town, sooner they'll see that there's corruption, there's things that don't add up, there's things being swept under the rug, and our world can't be fixed unless we all clean up our own backyard, because it's one giant mess, and it's like a compound mess. So we can't fix the whole mess. We have to clean up the little messes one by one, right? And since there's billions of us, it's actually pretty easy. We all just have to focus on what's in front of us instead of worrying about that damn trans swimmer who got all the records, or this stupid billionaire who's taking land from poor Canadians, or whatever the case may be. This is what we have to do is be very community oriented, because I think that's how they're trying to control us, is by putting us in this big global pool.
I feel like that's such a good message. Clean up your own backyard, because you've got so much more influence in where you live than you would on a global scale. And I feel like this for Cam, on Alternative, we focus on the global events and everything that's going on in the world, but we never actually look at what's going on at home.
Well, and these global players are just a amalgamation of their local interests, right? So how do you defeat a global entity, but in any other way than to take them out one by one, root by root, strut by strut? You sort of kick the legs out from under them, and they have nothing to stand on. These globalists, they just have their feet on 20 different countries at once. If all 20 of those countries said, get your foot off my land, they'd have nowhere to stand. They'd be freaking pirates again, like they were 400 years ago. So, and I think that's what really it is. It's just, we've let pirates take over our governments, and they're treating them like pirate ships. They're treating the land that they own like a pirate ship in a lot of ways.